Rub my leg.
Early 18th century. In the first shots we see the Queen of Great Britain asking her maid to say hello to her pet rabbits, but Sarah, despite all her love for the Queen, refuses to do so. Later, Anne decides to surprise the maid and give her a palace. Sarah said they could not afford such wastefulness now, for the war with France was not yet over. The Queen did not even know that. Meanwhile, Abigail, Sarah's cousin from a poor family, is on her way to the palace. The girl expects to get a job here. Sarah was not too happy to see her cousin, who looks like a filthy beggar. Abigail said she fell out of the carriage on the way, so she got dirty. Upon hearing the girl's name, the courtiers realized who she was. Her father lost his entire fortune and then in a fit of grief burned down the house, thus ruining his family's reputation. Despite Sarah's dismissive attitude, Abigail assured her that she was ready to take on any job. In the afternoon, the aristocrats amused themselves by watching the duck races. Many people do not like the fact that the Queen listens to the assistant in everything. Lady Sarah in turn participates in political discussions on an equal footing with the men. She believes that England should not offer the French a peace treaty, but should continue the war until final victory. Lord Marlborough agrees with his wife's opinion. At night, Abigail tried to sleep in the cramped den, where except for her, the rest of the servants huddled. The Queen told her faithful assistant that she was ready to receive the Russian ambassador. Sarah criticized her unfortunate makeup and could not hold back her tears. Sarah told her to go to her chambers and promised that she herself would meet the Russian delegation.
Did you just look at me? Did you? Look at me!
Abigail has become the court janitor and does the dirtiest work. During the night, the Queen had a flare-up of gout, and Sarah would not leave her bedside. The maids, including Abigail, were told to bring bandages. To distract Anne from the pain, Sarah asked her to remember how they had met. The next day, Abigail went into the woods to gather healing herbs for her burnt arm, and for the Queen as well. At one point she noticed a young man watching her. Abigail applied healing herbs to the Queen's sore feet. When she learned that the cousin had entered the royal chambers without her knowledge, Sarah was furious and ordered the footman to punish Abigail for her presumptuousness. Later, the commanders reported to Her Majesty and tried to explain the new war strategy to her, but Anne was not interested. She told Sarah that the very plan had reduced the burning in her legs. Abigail was being punished with a lash, but suddenly Sarah stopped it. She told the cousin that her kindness and naivety would not do her any good. Since the Queen did feel better, Sarah decided to make Abigail her maid as a reward. She now had her own room. Now Abigail wears a beautiful dress and runs personal errands for Sarah, who has undeniable influence and authority in the royal court. Since Sarah has the right to speak on behalf of the Queen, she has decided that the war with France must continue. Harley, the leader of the opposition, thinks this madness, for their losses in this protracted war are incalculable. Sarah, however, openly gloating, declared that there would be no peace treaty. Abigail is a witness to this conversation. Sarah soon says goodbye to her husband, who was about to leave for the war. Sarah assures the Queen that England will be victorious, and also learns that it was Abigail who gathered the healing herbs for her. Abigail later asked the cousin directly why she supported the war, knowing that her husband might not return from the front. Sarah replied that it was necessary, it was their duty. Samuel Masham realized that he had seen Abigail in the woods and asked where she got the horse. Abigail made it clear to him that she had no intention of explaining anything. Samuel liked that impertinence. A ball was held in the evening. The Queen, who was in a wheelchair, learned from Harley that the land tax had been doubled to finance the war, and this aroused indignation among the people, but Sarah quickly moved the topic of conversation, and watched in tears as Sarah danced with the bow. Suddenly the Queen told to stop it. She also asked Harley to order that the land tax be lowered again. When Sarah was alone with the Queen, she asked for forgiveness, but was slapped in the face. Sarah understood that she deserved it, for she had danced with a man in front of Anne. But Sarah was ready to atone. The Queen and her faithful assistant were unaware that they were not alone in the chambers, and were indulging in passion. The shocked Abigail watched, trying not to give away her presence. Quietly leaving the chambers, Abigail bumped into Harley in the corridor, who offered to take her for a walk. He was aware that the girl was of noble birth, but had lost everything to her father. Abigail realized that Harley wants her to spy on her cousin and the Queen. In this way he expects to get dirt on Sarah and thereby reduce her influence at court. Abigail declined, not at all expecting Harley to push her into a nettle. He asked her to think hard about the offer. The next day, Abigail heard Sarah convincing the Queen to announce the land tax increase again. Eventually Anne gave in. Abigail decided to tell the cousin about her recent conversation with Harley. The Queen, meanwhile, took care of her beloved rabbits and ate desserts that made her sick. Anna was not going to burden herself with royal duties. All her thoughts were occupied by Sarah. Soon Sarah was informed that the queen urgently wanted to see her. Sarah found Anne near the open window and pushed her to the floor, not wanting to listen to another demonstrative tantrum. But Anne cried anyway, accusing Sarah of not paying enough attention to her. While Sarah was present at Parliament, Abigail came on her behalf to the queen in order to entertain her in every possible way. At first Anne was indignant at this deed of the favorite, but softened when she realized that Abigail was a very sophisticated and well-read person. The queen showed the maid her favorite 17 rabbits, one for each of the children she had lost. Anne was never able to give the country an heir. In the middle of the night, Samuel unceremoniously entered Abigail's room, expecting to have a pleasant time, but she didn't give him what he wanted by kicking him out the door. Sarah went on a horseback ride with the queen, apologizing for sending Abigail instead last time. Anne was especially upset when she realized that Sarah did not remember her rabbits by name, unlike Abigail. The queen is spending more and more time in the company of her new maid. She was pleased to communicate with Abigail, who knows how to listen and support. But Anne was still tormented by the fact that she had never experienced the joy of motherhood. It made her deeply melancholy. Abigail was constantly by her side, helping her forget the troubles. One day they were caught by Sarah, who later told the cousin that from now on she would not burden her with spending time with the queen. But what was Sarah's surprise when Anne sent a footman for Abigail, not for her. But Sarah made a personal visit to the royal chambers anyway, thinking that the queen had done it deliberately to make her jealous. At night, Harley caught Abigail off guard, hinting that if she did not cooperate, she would regret it. All Abigail said was that Sarah was again persuading the queen to double the tax. At Parliament, Harley took the floor first, outlining the queen the prospect of a tax increase and a continuation of the war. Anne was terrified, unsure how to do the right thing, as Sarah continued to press her. From the strain, the queen fainted. One day while Abigail was reading a book in the woods, she was startled by Samuel. They started fooling around. Samuel wanted to kiss her, but was rebuffed. Abigail declared that he wouldn't get anything until he married her. Samuel can't take a maid as his wife, but Abigail promised that she would arrange it. Anne was depressed over her disgrace. She was never able to announce her decision to continue the war, so the parliamentary session is postponed to another date. The queen was outraged when she found Abigail asleep in her bed. The maid tried to justify herself by saying that she just couldn't help herself. The queen watched as she dressed in a hurry. At night Abigail was told to come urgently to the royal chambers because Her Majesty again had an exacerbation of the disease. But that was only a pretext. In fact, the queen wanted to be alone with Abigail. Sarah, who returned late, caught them together. They were asleep, so they had not noticed her arrival. Sarah could not believe that Anne had traded her for another favorite. The next day she was furious and sent Abigail back to work in the kitchen. But Abigail was no longer going to endure this humiliation. With the help of a book, she herself inflicted beatings and in tears came to the queen. Later Sarah told Anne that she had fired Abigail for stealing, but the queen said she would make the girl her maid of honor. As she watched and boarded the carriage with Abigail, Sarah realized that she risked losing everything. The queen was resting with her new favorite. They didn't expect Sarah to want to join them. Abigail did not like the fact that Anne again began to succumb to Sarah's charms. For the rest of the day the queen did not leave her first favorite, and on her arrival at the palace she took her to the chambers. Abigail was out of her mind with anger. Samuel listened to her tirades of anger, not quite sure what she was talking about. The sisters continued to fight for Her Majesty's attention with even more fervor. One day Abigail made tea by slipping something into the cousin's mug. Later while walking, Sarah felt sick and fell off the horse, which dragged her along the road. Meanwhile, Abigail offered Harley a mutually beneficial cooperation. She would arrange an audience with the queen and give him a chance to save the country, and he in turn will repay her with a favor in return. Abigail complied with the request and arranged for Harley to meet the queen. He told her of the disastrous effects of the war and the tax increase that would lead to riots among the people. The queen promised to think about it. Nor did Harley forget his promise, asking the queen to approve the marriage between Abigail and Colonel Samuel Masham. Anne is distraught because no one can find Sarah. The queen thought that the favorite had decided to annoy her in this way, and ordered that the search be stopped. At this time the wounded Sarah regained consciousness in the brothel. The queen awoke in a sweat in the middle of the night and began calling for Sarah, ordering the servants to find her at any cost. Harley and the Prime Minister tried to convey to the queen that she must not be distracted from her royal duties, but all her thoughts were on Sarah. Abigail consoled Her Majesty, who in gratitude decided to let her marry Samuel after all. Abigail pretended to be surprised. This marriage would enable her to regain her noble position in society. The marriage was performed immediately, and now Abigail and Samuel are legally husband and wife. Abigail fears Sarah has survived and prepares to take revenge on her. Sarah felt better, but the saviors wouldn't let her leave here and wanted to make her work. Sarah asked to find Godolphin, who would pay for her release. That's how she was able to get out of here. That same day Sarah returned to the palace. On seeing her, Abigail, now not a maid but a noble lady, suggested that she forget their feud, but Sarah was clearly in no mood to be friends. The queen was shocked to see Sarah with a scar on her face, but alive. Sarah asked Anne to send Abigail away, but the queen was no longer going to make concessions to her favorite and listen to her advice on politics. The next day, Sarah threatened Anne to make their love letters public if she did not fulfill all of her conditions. However, after rereading the letters, Sarah burned them. That same day she learned that the queen was sending her away from court. Sarah tried to explain herself to her beloved, but Anne would not open the door for her. Sarah wanted to convince the queen that Abigail did not love her, but was only manipulating her. Unlike Abigail, Sarah always tells Anne the truth. That's what love is. At Parliament, the queen announced that she was appointing Mr. Harley as Prime Minister, and that she intended to make peace with France. Abigail reveled in her victory. At night Sarah prepared to leave the palace. Anne watched from her window. Abigail, on the other hand, plunged into social life, paying less and less attention to her queen. Godolphin advises Sarah to write a letter of apology to the queen. Only by making peace with Her Majesty can Sarah regain her influence at court. She had no idea that in the meantime Abigail had accused her and her husband of stealing money from the royal treasury. Abigail read Sarah's letter before it reached the queen. She burned the letter and wiped away her tears. Without waiting for an apology from Sarah, the queen openly accused her and Lord Marlborough of embezzlement, ordering their expulsion from the country. Abigail, who was in the royal chambers, begins to torment one of Anna's rabbits. The queen, woken up by the squeak of her pet, orders Abigail to massage her legs, treating the former favorite as a servant.